You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Identity is a top attack vector. In our interview with Kavitha Mariappan from Rubrik, she breaks down why 90% of security leaders believe that identity-based attacks are their biggest threat. Throughout this conversation, we explore why recovery times are getting longer, not shorter, and what resiliency will look like in this AI-driven world. If you're struggling to get a handle on identity risk, this is something you should tune into. Check out the full interview at thecyberwire.com/rubric. Maybe that's an urgent message from your CEO, or maybe it's a deepfake trying to target your business. Doppel is the AI-native social engineering defense platform fighting back against impersonation and manipulation. As attackers use AI to make their tactics more sophisticated, Doppel uses it to fight back, from automatically dismantling cross-channel attacks to building team resilience and more. Doppel, outpacing what's next in social engineering. Learn more at doppel.com. That's DOPPEL.com.
Today is February 13th, 2026. I'm Maria Varmazes, and this is T-Minus.
T-Minus. 20 seconds to LOS egress. Go for deploy. Roger, roll. 5.
The NRO announced the first tranche of 3 awards under its Strategic Commercial Enhancements Commercial Solutions opening for advanced commercial remote sensing capabilities.
4.
Axiom Space has secured an additional $350 million in financing.
3.
NASA and VAST have signed an order for the 6th private astronaut mission to the International Space Station.
2.
Arianespace successfully launched 32 Amazon LEO satellites from Europe's spaceport in French Guiana.
1.
A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 to the ISS. Now, it is Friday the 13th, and in some corners that is considered an unlucky day. Well, it is unlucky for some, but hey, not for you, because we are catching up with Greg Gillinger and all things intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance in space later in the show. And we have the space traffic report following that from our partners at NSF. So stay with us after today's intelligence briefing. Happy Friday, everybody. It certainly was not an unlucky start for NASA's SpaceX Crew 12, who finally caught a break this morning with the weather and launched to the ISS from Florida. A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket lifted the Dragon spacecraft into orbit, carrying NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, ESA astronaut Sophie Adeneau, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. The spacecraft will dock autonomously to the space-facing port of the station's Harmony module at approximately 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Valentine's Day, Saturday, February 14th. It will bring the crew back to its standard 7-person capacity on the International Space Station after the early departure of Crew 11. Meir, Hathaway, Adeneau, and Fedyaev will join the Expedition 74 crew, including NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kud-Shverkov and Sergei Mikhaev, who are already aboard the orbiting laboratory. During its mission, Crew 12 will conduct scientific research to prepare for human exploration beyond low Earth orbit and to benefit humanity on Earth. Participating crew members will study pneumonia-causing bacteria to improve cardiovascular treatments, on-demand intravenous fluid generation for future space missions, and research on how physical characteristics may affect blood flow during spaceflight. Other experiments include automated plant health monitoring and investigations of plant and nitrogen-fixing microbe interactions to enhance food production in space. And continuing with news of launches, yesterday, Thursday, February 12th, Arianespace successfully launched 32 Amazon LEO satellites from Europe's spaceport in French Guiana. The satellites were delivered to low Earth orbit at an altitude of approximately 465 kilometers. The mission lasted an hour and 54 minutes from liftoff to separation of all of the satellites. The mission, called VA-267, is the first of 18 Ariane 6 launches that have been booked to support the deployment of the Amazon LEO constellation. It was also the first launch of the Ariane 6 in its 4-booster configuration and carried the heaviest payload ever placed into orbit by the European launcher. And it marked its first dedicated launch for a commercial customer. For Amazon LEO, it was the first launch for the constellation performed by a European launcher. NASA and VAST have signed an order for the 6th private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. The mission is targeted to launch no earlier than summer 2027 from Florida and is the company's first selection to the orbiting lab. The VAST mission is expected to spend up to 14 days aboard the space station. VAST will submit 4 proposed crew members to NASA and its international partners for review. Once approved and confirmed, they will train with NASA, international partners, and SpaceX for their flight. The company is contracted with SpaceX as a launch provider for transportation to and from the space station. The company will purchase mission services from NASA, including crew consumables, cargo delivery, storage, and other in-orbit resources for daily use. NASA will purchase the capability to return scientific samples that must remain cold during transit back to Earth. And the other company supporting private astronaut missions to the ISS is also making headlines today. Axiom Space has secured an additional $350 million in financing. The company says it plans to use the capital to advance its mission to deliver the successor to the International Space Station and ready its next-generation spacesuits for the United States' return to the moon. The financing includes both equity and debt components. Type 1 Ventures and the Qatar Investment Authority co-led the round. The National Reconnaissance Office, better known as the NRO, announced the first tranche of 3 awards under its Strategic Commercial Enhancements Commercial Solutions opening for advanced commercial remote sensing capabilities. Companies receiving awards include HEO for non-Earth imagery, SatView for medium-wave infrared imagery, and Sierra Nevada Corporation for RF capabilities. That wraps up today's top 5 stories, but while I still have you here, friends, we are not publishing on Monday because it's a federal holiday here in the United States. It is President's Day on Monday, and we have not 1, but 2 great programs that are dropping in the feed for you. The first one up is a special Nexus episode on orbital data centers, dropping with special guests from Axiom and Sophia Space. And the second great program that we're debuting is the very first episode of our brand new series called Cyber Beyond Borders, and it will be dropping in your T-minus feed starting on Monday. And it's a 3-part series that I'm hosting where I got to put my cyber hat back on for a little bit based on a recent trip that I took to the NATO Cyber Range in Tallinn, Estonia. So what is this major military alliance doing to train its cyber defenders for attacks in the cyber realm? And what kind of threats are they preparing for? Well, we will take a look at those questions and more in this new series. Part 1 drops on Monday. It's Cyber Beyond Borders, and I really hope you'll check it out.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/N365 Copilot.
Today we have our monthly update from Greg Gillinger from Integrity ISR on the latest satellite movements in orbit. And I asked Greg to recap the start of this year.
China actually had a couple of launch failures at the beginning of the year, one with a very significant one with SJ-32 on board, I believe. A very rare failure of a Long March 3 Bravo. From a Chinese standpoint, they've got some things to figure out as to what may have gone wrong with that particular launch. But before that, so on December 30th, they did launch a Long March 7 Alpha with a couple of interesting satellites on there. So we call them the Shijian or SJ-29 Alpha and Bravo. And China doesn't release a heck of a lot of information on these. Well, they don't release a heck of a lot of information on anything, but particularly Spartan in terms of what they release regarding these SJ or satellites, right? So in the launch notification for the SJ-29 Alpha Bravo, they used some interesting language saying that these satellites were for, I believe it was target. They used the word target in there. I don't think we've seen that ever before. So it's obviously for some sort of space domain awareness capability, testing out new technologies, but they dropped the term target in there. So they got a lot of folks' attention of, okay, maybe this is some sort of target identification system, or does it have other capabilities on there? Who knows? So it went up into geosynchronous orbit. So it's over 73 degrees east longitude and has about a 3-degree inclination. So it's geosynchronous, not geostationary. And so a lot of attention being paid to it. Some ground-based observers were quick to notice that after a couple of days, you could actually make out 2 different objects, so confirming what China had stated, that there were actually 2 spacecraft on board. But they did notice that one spacecraft was significantly brighter than the other. So what that means, we don't know anything about the size or shape, but that is a good indicator that they are not identical, right? So one of the things, when I'd first seen the launch go up, it reminded me back in 2021, China used the Long March 7 to launch the Shiyan 12 satellites. So there's 1201 and 1202. And those are they're geostationary wanderers, right? So they're there primarily for going back and forth across the geobelt and observing other satellites as they go. So I thought maybe that was kind of the next step for that program. But turns out that's not the case. These satellites apparently are not identical, unlike the Shiyan pair that was launched in 2021. So we don't know exactly what's going on here. We've seen some maneuvers from the SJ-29 Bravo satellite, so the one that's on the dimmer side, or not as bright. And it looks like it's maintaining a position about 30 kilometers away from the SJ-29 Alpha satellite. So they're in some sort of rendezvous proximity operation currently. Not incredibly close, but 30 kilometers at geo is relatively close. Right?
Seems pretty close. Yeah, and the visual magnitude, I mean, I would imagine you don't want to infer necessarily too much from that, because it could be a lot of different variables that contribute to why something has less magnitude. It could be the way it's angled. It's not necessarily a distance thing, right?
Right. It's more likely a size or vehicle composition, or probably both, right? So you could also get some glinting. But if you look at things over time, those things should even out. So what we do know is that both spacecraft are stable and operating and now maneuvering. And that one is, and they're not the same shapes or sizes, I think is probably a safe bet.
Okay. All right. So what else is on your radar?
So this is something that's still playing out. I did find it interesting that so the United States operates, I think it's up to 4 geosynchronous space situational awareness program satellites. So these are the GSAT vehicles to kind of keep tabs on what everybody's doing up in geo. They conduct the characterization mission. So really taking images at safe distances of interesting objects, right? So what some folks noticed right away was that as SJ-29 Alpha and Bravo got into position, that USA 325, which is a GSAP satellite, also showed up in that area, right? So they're not coplanar. USA 325 has a different inclination, different RAN, but it is certainly in the vicinity now. And it looks like, if you go and look at publicly available data on USA 325's location, the last time it was updated was in late December, and that placed the satellite way over towards Indonesia in that area there. It looks like in early January, it made some pretty significant maneuvers to get into place to be the welcome wagon for SJ-29 and kind of check things out. So now you've got these SJ-29 pair of satellites kind of doing their thing, you've got USA 325 in the area as well to occasionally keep tabs of what's going on. So that'll be an interesting to watch here as things unfold over the next, who knows, couple weeks, 3 weeks, maybe longer. We saw with the SJ-21 and SJ-25 refueling effort that these things can go on for months at a time. So we'll see.
Okay. Is there anything else that we want to add about the Chinese satellites, or are there any other Chinese satellites that you've been keeping an eye on lately?
There are a couple other satellites we can talk about as well. I just kind of mentioned SJ-21 and SJ-25. So folks might recall that those are the two satellites that have been engaged in a refueling operation, the first of its kind in GEO since going back to this summer. They looked to dock on the 2nd of July of 2025 and remained docked for several months. And then we saw them begin to separate in the fall of this year. I think it was in October, November timeframe, right? And since that time, so we did see them separate, but we didn't see any large maneuvers where SJ-25 went to go refuel another satellite, or SJ-21 went off to go do perhaps more of its mission. They kind of remained in the same area. And that continued really through the first couple of weeks of January of 2026, where we saw, depending on the data sources you look at, SJ-21 and SJ-25, on a couple of occasions got within close enough range, so that range may be less than 5 kilometers, maybe it's less than 1 kilometer, depending on what data you look at. There was some conjecture that perhaps they had redocked at one point, but there were several instances where we were unable to resolve the two different satellites from ground-based telescopes, right? So we're not exactly sure what was going on there. It's difficult to tell one satellite from another once they do get within those closer ranges. So depending on who you look, what data you're using, from the 1st through the 15th of January, the two satellites seem to get within 5 kilometers of one another 4 times, 8 times. I've seen some reporting of that nature. We're not really sure. But it looks like they were actually practicing these operations, these rendezvous proximity operations in GEO. So they had a couple of test vehicles. It looks like they're comfortable with them. And we saw a lot of activity similar to that leading up to the January timeframe. So a lot of practice going on with those two satellites for Chinese space operators as they, I assume, I seek to get more comfortable with running these kinds of operations.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then in the middle of January, you saw a couple of small maneuvers from both satellites. And as I'm talking to you today, it looks like they're about 600 kilometers apart. And drifting further apart. So maybe they moved on to another phase of their mission. It's worth noting that they are still plane matched. So if they wanted to come back together, do more RPO for whatever reason, they could do so with fairly minor maneuvers in terms of the amount of fuel it would take. So we'll see how that plays out over the coming weeks.
That should be interesting to see what happens. Got anything else in the tank, or
yeah, so I guess really quickly, a little closer to the Earth, we had a Yaogan 50 TAC 01 launch from China. And the interesting thing, so Yaogan satellites, we believe, are used for national defense, for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance for the Chinese defense forces. And the interesting thing about Yaogan 50 is it went into a retrograde orbit, which a retrograde orbit in and of itself is not unusual. Most of your imagery satellites are in slight retrograde, that is like 97 degrees or greater. So a retrograde orbit is any orbit greater with an inclination greater than 90 degrees. So your imagery satellites typically are in sun synchronous orbit, which is 97 to 98 degrees, somewhere in that, depending on their altitude.
Mm-hmm.
Yaogan 50 inclination is 142, which is really in retrograde. So there's some, so that means it's going counter to the Earth's rotation, right? And the effect of that is for Yaogan 50, it'll go, that inclination will take it as far north as 38 degrees north latitude and 38 degrees south latitude. But orbiting against the rotation or counter to the rotation of the Earth actually increases its relative speed or relative velocity to the Earth's surface. And that relative velocity is an important component for radar imaging satellites, right? So the greater your relative velocity with your target, then the better potential you have for greater resolution. So based off of that orbit, which we had not seen before for Yaogan satellites, we surmise that this thing is actually a synthetic aperture radar imaging system. And we'll wait to see how many more of those actually go up. The name seems to indicate that there will be more than one in the not too distant future.
And up next, we have the space traffic report from our partners at nasaspaceflight.com.
I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and this is your weekly space traffic report for T-Space. Starting off the week on February 7th, China launched a space plane. Lifting off from the Zhochuan Satellite Launch Center at 3:58 UTC, a Changzheng 2F carried the Changfu Sheyang Xiyang Hangtianqi, or CSSHQ, into space. It's a reusable experimental spacecraft akin to Boeing's X-37B, which has been flying missions for the U.S. Air Force and later the Space Force since 2010 and is currently on its 8th flight across 2 vehicles. The Chinese space plane flew for the first time in 2020 and is now on its 4th mission, although we don't know whether it's been the same vehicle every time or not. Like the X-37B, CSSHQ's missions are very secretive, so we don't know what it plans to do on its flight. It'll likely conduct experiments or release some satellites like it did on all 3 of its earlier missions. We'll just have to wait and see. Later that day, SpaceX launched a Starlink mission from California, marking Falcon 9's return to flight after the failed deorbit on the Starlink Group's 1732 mission 5 days earlier. The rocket took to the skies above the Vandenberg Space Force Base at 20:58 Universal Time on February 7th, carrying 25 Starlink V2 mini satellites into a sun-synchronous orbit. SpaceX used booster B-1088 for this mission, which flew for the 13th time and touched down on the deck of Course I Still Love You, capping off another successful flight. Later in the week, Falcon 9 launched another batch of Starlinks from Vandenberg. Liftoff occurred on February 11th at 17:11 UTC. The mission's first stage, B-1100, successfully touched down on Of Course I Still Love You, completing its 3rd flight. With 24 more Starlink V2 minis delivered to sun-synchronous orbit, SpaceX has now launched 11,162 satellites for the constellation. Of these, 1,492 have returned to Earth, and 8,377 are now in their operational orbits. Thursday was a busy day in spaceflight, with no fewer than 4 flights lifting off from all around our planet, starting with another launch from China. At 6:37 Universal Time on February 12th, a Zhelong 3 rocket lifted off from the Dongfang Hongtiangong launch platform stationed in the South China Sea. The rocket carried an Earth observation satellite for Pakistan, which is equipped with optical sensors to aid in land mapping, environmental monitoring, and natural disaster management, among other things. On its way up to sun-synchronous orbit, the satellite was accompanied by 6 rideshare payloads, one of which was for the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Next, we had the first launch of Russia's Proton rocket in almost 3 years. Lifting off from Baikonur at 8:52 UTC that same day, the rocket carried Russia's 5th Electro-L weather satellite into a geostationary orbit. Proton also carried an additional payload that we don't know much about, but its name suggests that its purpose is likely to occupy some communications frequencies as a placeholder so that Russia won't lose its rights to use them. Half an hour later, the United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket lifted off from Space Launch Complex 41 in Florida, carrying 2 satellites for the U.S. Space Force's Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness Program. Numbered 7 and 8, these are the latest in a series designed to track satellite activity near geosynchronous orbit to protect space-based national security assets. Vulcan released a third satellite called ESPA-Ring into geosynchronous orbit, which the Space Force plans to use for research, development, and training purposes. On the way up, Vulcan experienced an anomaly, or an observation as ULA calls it, with one of its 4 solid rocket boosters. It appeared to have burned through its nozzle, which later threw some debris into the rocket's exhaust plume. Regardless, the rocket seems to have been able to deliver its satellites into their destination orbits, which the Space Force later confirmed. The issue bears resemblance to a similar anomaly that occurred on Vulcan's second flight. The impact on the rocket's upcoming launches remains unclear at this time. Later that day, a rocket lifted off from Europe spaceport in French Guiana, lofting a batch of internet satellites for Amazon's Leo constellation. The mission marked several firsts, as it was the first to fly on Ariane 6's 4 booster variant, which lifted off from Kourou at 1645 UTC on February 12th. The 32 Leo satellites were encapsulated in Ariane 6's 20-meter-long fairing, which also flew for the first time on this mission. The 5 previous Ariane 6 missions all used the 14-meter version. And for the final 2 first on this mission, it was the first Ariane 6 to launch for a commercial customer, and the first of 18 missions on a contract to deliver Amazon Leo satellites to low Earth orbit. Wrapping up the week, SpaceX launched its Crew 12 mission to the International Space Station on Friday. The crew of 4 consists of Commander Jessica Meir and pilot Jack Hathaway, both NASA astronauts, accompanied by mission specialist ESA astronaut Sophie Adano and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. After the crew boarded Dragon Freedom, Falcon 9 was loaded with propellants and lifted off at 10:15 Universal Time on February 13th. The capsule and its passengers are set to arrive at the orbital outpost on February 14th, with docking scheduled for 2015 UTC. This marked the 5th flight for Freedom and the 2nd for Falcon 9 booster B1101, which touched down successfully on the brand new landing zone LZ-40. SpaceX constructed this pad at the Slick 40 complex to replace LZ-1, which was decommissioned last year after the company's lease of the Launch Complex 13 site expired. Going into next week, SpaceX plans to launch 4 Starlink missions, 2 from California and 2 from Florida. Last week, Firefly announced that the launch window for the 7th flight of its Alpha rocket opens on February 18th or early February 19th if you set your clocks to UTC. The mission will be the return to flight after the failure on Alpha's 6th flight in late April of last year. During that mission, the first stage disintegrated after stage separation, and the resulting explosion damaged the upper stage engine, preventing it from reaching orbit. Firefly plans to use this next flight, called Stairway to 7, to test technology for Alpha's Block 2 configuration, which will fly from Flight 8 onward. Hopefully, the unfortunate lessons learned paid off, and this one will perform without any issues. As always, some other launches may pop up in the schedule after we publish this episode, so we recommend that you check out nextspaceflight.com or download the app on your phone to stay up to date. And that's your weekly update of spaceflight news. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and we'll see you all again next week to recap this week in spaceflight. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and that's your weekly space traffic report. Now back to T-minus space.
We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back. Friends, it is Friday the 13th in February, which aside from the whole unlucky superstition thing, that can only mean one thing. Tomorrow is a rare conjunction event. It'll be Valentine's Day on a Saturday. Oh, that is a 10 out of 10 difficulty level. If you have cause to observe the occasion, I hope you planned ahead, because a Saturday Valentine's Day is an all-hands-on-deck situation, isn't it? Restaurant reservations are going to be booked solid. You know that one bouquet at the grocery store that's still left is looking real sad and picked over. And chocolates, you want some of those? Try 2 weeks ago, buddy. Womp womp. But if you need a message of love and affection and would rather not try to pen some poetry yourself, I understand. Worry not, my friends, because the Cyrano de Bergerac of space has got you covered. And that would be none other than, drumroll please, The Space Systems Command. Oh yeah, baby. Nothing gets romance a-flowing than words of love from your favorite military field command. And they even posted their sweet, sweet Valentines on LinkedIn, because you know that is the very first place everyone goes for getting their ego fluffed. So, what tantalizing sentiments from SSE await your beloved? Let me walk you through some of their selections. I'm tracking your trajectory, and you're headed straight for my heart. Are you a satellite? Because I'm picking up a strong signal between us. You launch my heart into a whole new orbit. Now, if you really, really, really think the apple of your eye will go for a Space Systems Command Valentine's Day e-card on LinkedIn and it won't get you in trouble with HR, we've got the link for you. Happy Valentine's Day? Happy Valentine's Day. And that's T-Minus, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like the show, please share a rating and review in your podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to space@n2k.com. We are proud that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector. From the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K helps space and cybersecurity professionals grow, learn, and stay informed. As the nexus for discovery and connection, we bring you the people, the technology, and the ideas shaping the future of secure innovation. Learn how at n2k.com. N2K's senior producer is Alice Carruth. Our producer is Liz Stokes. We are mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I am your host, Maria Varmazis. Thank you for listening. Good luck on Valentine's Day, and have a great weekend.
T-Minus.
If you only attend one cybersecurity conference this year, make it RSAC 2026. It's happening March 23rd through the 26th in San Francisco, bringing together the global security community for 4 days of expert insights, hands-on learning, and real innovation. I'll say this plainly, I never miss this conference. The ideas and conversations stay with me all year. Join thousands of practitioners and leaders tackling today's toughest challenges and shaping what comes next. Register today at rsaconference.com/cyberwire26. I'll see you in San Francisco.